Rain poured over the city as Daniel Carter stood outside the glass tower of Harrison Technologies with a small cardboard box in his hands. Inside the box were 10 years of memories, a family photo, a coffee mug from his daughter Emma, and a notebook filled with ideas that had helped the company earn millions of dollars. Just 15 minutes earlier, he had been called into the CEO's office. "I'm sorry, Daniel," the CEO said coldly. "Your position has been eliminated. Security will escort you out." Daniel looked around the room. None of the executives could meet his eyes. They knew the decision wasn't fair, but nobody dared to speak. Daniel nodded silently. "Thank you for the opportunity." He picked up his box and walked out with his head held high. As the elevator doors closed, several employees whispered, "I can't believe they fired him. He built half of this company. What will happen now?" Outside the building, Daniel placed the box on the hood of his old car. He took out his phone. He dialed one number. When the call connected, he calmly said only 6 words. "Fire every one of them. Today." He ended the call. That single sentence would change hundreds of lives before sunset. Welcome to Heartline Stories, where every story reminds us that kindness, courage, and truth always find their way back. If you enjoy emotional stories with unforgettable twists, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. 10 years earlier, Daniel wasn't just another employee. He was a brilliant software architect who had joined Harrison Technologies when it was a small startup with fewer than 30 employees. He worked late nights, skipped vacations, missed birthdays, all to help build the company. His wife Sarah often smiled and said, "One day all this hard work will be worth it." But life had different plans. Sarah became seriously ill. Despite every treatment, she passed away, leaving Daniel to raise their 5-year-old daughter Emma alone. From that day forward, Daniel lived for only one purpose: Emma. Every morning he made breakfast. Every evening he helped with homework. Every weekend belonged to her. No matter how difficult work became, Daniel never complained. Because Emma's smile made everything worthwhile. Things changed when Harrison Technologies hired a new CEO named Richard Collins. Richard cared only about numbers. Employees became statistics. Loyalty meant nothing. Experience meant little. Within months, Richard fired dozens of senior workers to reduce costs. Daniel often questioned unethical decisions during executive meetings. Richard hated being challenged. One afternoon, Richard announced, "We're replacing several departments with outsourced contractors." Daniel stood. "That decision will destroy product quality." Richard smiled. "I wasn't asking for your opinion." Everyone fell silent. Daniel realized his days were numbered. 3 months later, the termination letter arrived. Richard believed he'd removed the last obstacle standing in his way. What Richard didn't know was one important fact. Daniel had quietly become the largest private investor in Harrison Technologies years earlier. When the struggling startup couldn't find funding, Daniel had invested every dollar of his savings. The founders rewarded him with confidential voting rights that very few people knew existed. Those rights could remove the executive board instantly. And the chairman of the board still trusted Daniel more than anyone else. The phone call Daniel made wasn't to a lawyer. It wasn't to the media. It was to the chairman. After hearing what happened, the chairman became furious. "They fired you?" "Yes." "Without consulting the board?" "Yes." There was silence. Then the chairman answered, "Leave this to me." Exactly 3 hours later, every executive received an emergency email. Mandatory board meeting. Attendance required. Richard walked confidently into the conference room. He expected praise. Instead, the chairman entered with several board members. Nobody smiled. Richard stood. "Good afternoon." The chairman interrupted. "Sit down." The room became silent. A file landed on the table. Inside were documents proving Richard had manipulated reports, fired experienced staff illegally, ignored compliance warnings, and awarded expensive contracts to friends. Richard's face turned pale. This isn't true." The chairman replied. "We've completed the investigation." Another board member spoke. "Effective immediately, Richard Collins, you're terminated." Security entered. The same security guards Richard had ordered to escort Daniel outside. Now they escorted Richard. No one said a word. Then another announcement came. Every executive involved in Daniel's dismissal was removed. The chairman remembered Daniel's request. "Fire every one of them." By evening, the entire leadership team was gone. Daniel, meanwhile, wasn't celebrating. He was sitting in the front row of Emma's school auditorium. Emma was performing in a music recital. As she finished playing the piano, she searched the audience. She found her father smiling proudly. Nothing else mattered. After the show, she ran into his arms. "Dad! You came! I wouldn't miss it for the world." Emma noticed his eyes looked tired. "Did something happen at work?" Daniel smiled softly. "I think today was the beginning of something better." The next morning, the chairman visited Daniel's home personally. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me nothing. We need you back." Daniel shook his head. "I've spent too many years missing moments with my daughter." "What if you became CEO?" Daniel laughed. "I've never wanted power. You'd have complete freedom." Daniel looked toward Emma, who was drawing pictures in the living room. Then he answered. "I have one condition." "Anything." "Employees come before profits." The chairman smiled. "Done." Within 6 months, Harrison Technologies became one of the best workplaces in the country. Daniel restored every employee who had been unfairly dismissed. He introduced flexible schedules for parents, mental health support, education programs, fair promotions. Profits increased more than ever before. Not because people feared losing their jobs. Because they finally loved coming to work. One afternoon, Richard visited the company hoping for another chance. He waited nervously in reception. Daniel walked downstairs. Richard lowered his head. "I was wrong." Daniel looked at him quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." Daniel smiled. "I forgive you." Richard looked surprised. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." He turned and walked away. That day, Richard finally understood the difference between authority and leadership. Years later, Emma graduated from university. During her graduation speech, she said, "My father taught me something I'll never forget. Success isn't measured by how many people work beneath you. It's measured by how many people rise because you believed in them." The audience stood and applauded. Daniel wiped away a tear. Sarah's promise had been kept. Emma had grown into a remarkable young woman. Sometimes life seems unfair. Sometimes good people lose everything. But character always outlasts power. Respect always outlasts fear. And kindness always leaves the deepest legacy. If this story touched your heart, thank you for spending your time with Heartline Stories. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Heartline Stories for more emotional stories filled with hope, justice, and unforgettable endings.